doesn't matter whether you like Donald Trump or not. That is an insignificant conversation. It doesn't matter. When it comes to whether or not he can be on the ballot in places like Michigan or in other places, well, now we're talking about the law. Now we're talking about the Constitution. Now we're talking about whether or not these people making this claim that Trump is an insurrectionist and according to the 14th Amendment, he's not allowed on the ballot, whether or not that should stand. But as we have seen, just Michigan, just yesterday, he gets to stay on the ballot. This is a conversation about where those forces against Trump have lost and losing on the constitutional merits, and people wanting to decide an election before you get a chance to do so. Guys, welcome to the show, presented by Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org, economic liberty, free speech. These are the good things. This right here is William Jacobson, Cornell law professor. He is the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. And of course, he follows these things. Before we get into the Trump stuff, over there at Legal Insurrection, this was one of your headlines, sir. Cornell graduate student workers vote to join anti-Israel National Union. Now, it's not just Cornell where you work. What we're seeing on college campuses with the anti-Semitism, with the support for Hamas, while I think it has stunned many people, for those of us who have been observers, we knew it was there. Maybe we didn't realize the depth and the breadth of it. Talk to me about what's going on at your Cornell University and what union have these people joined?
Yeah, well, the graduate students went through a process and voted to join the United Electrical Workers Union. There's several other terms in there, and it didn't get a lot of attention. And Israel wasn't a central issue, as far as I know, in that decision. But the fact of the matter is, they did end up joining a union. Now they've got to negotiate with the university, but they just passed the vote to, collectively bargain with a union that has endorsed the boycott of Israel. And so that raises a number of concerns about whether those policies will now work their way onto campus, whether the graduate students on their own will try to implement them. And so that's a concern. That's a concern that I've called attention to, because I remember back in 2015, when the United Electrical Workers made that declaration of support for the boycott, it was a big deal. And it was actually litigated, and it went to the National Labor Relations Board. And so I don't know if the students were aware of that. It's hard to believe they weren't aware of that, because in 2017, they tried to affiliate with the American Federation of Teachers and were unsuccessful. They lost that vote. So I think it's just very curious. And however we got there, I think the issue is, where does it go from here?
Now, the where does it go from here involves where does it come from? I've been making an argument, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, that when we see what we're seeing on college campuses, it's clear that there are professors, there are administrations that are absolutely aligned, either you can argue with Hamas or with the idea that Israel's existence is the problem. Maybe that's the way they would say it in a nicer tone. And we could discuss college campuses where administrators have stayed silent. They have failed to show a level of moral clarity. And this has happened in a series of colleges, Ivy League and others. But this hatred or this Pavlovian response didn't start in college. My argument is it started in high school and before that, but I don't necessarily believe it started writ large with parents. Am I off base or am I onto something?
Well, I think this intense demonization, I would call it dehumanization of Israel, of Israeli Jews, did start on college campuses and has worked its way down. I don't think this is a parental movement. I think this is a faculty movement. There are thousands of faculty around the country who have signed on to the boycott of Israel. They're extremely aggressive. They may not be the majority, but they are the very vocal minority. And they tend to dominate certain subject areas that student activists gravitate towards too. Needless to say, it's not physics and chemistry. It's, political science. It is the humanities, those sort of soft subjects where faculty view themselves, and they say this, activism is an important part of their teaching. So that's what you get. You get 20 years of demonization of Israel. You get 20 years of a boycott movement. You get 20 years of students on campuses only hearing one side of the story. And you toss in the racialization of the conflict under the rubric of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and white oppressor and non-white oppressed, and people of color versus the whites. That all gets mixed in. And you see that at Cornell. Multiple times they've brought these resolutions, and they organize students of color against Israel. So it's a very toxic, and that has now spread out because you've had 15 years of students being indoctrinated this way on college campuses, and now it's in K through 12, and now it's elsewhere in society.
And all of the oppressed oppressor goes back to proletariat and bourgeoisie and Marxism. And when Barack Obama talked about the 99% and the 1%, it is all part of the same conversation, no?
Yeah, it is. It's a hatred of the United States. I mean, which is manifesting itself as hatred of Israel. It's the old Iranian mullah formulation: great Satan, United States; little Satan, Israel. These student activists are almost uniformly hate the United States, think we are uniquely evil in the world, think the only thing that ever happened in this country was slavery, and that somehow slavery was unique to us and unique to the Western world, when it wasn't. It's happened throughout the globe, in many cases, for lengthier periods of time than happened here. So they are giving a distorted view, but it is a hatred of capitalism. It's a hatred of America, which is manifesting itself as hatred of Israel and anti-Semitism.
Let's move it along. We, of course, saw the rally that took place in D.C. Yesterday, the rally that it seems the Washington Post didn't want to put as a headline on their front page, trying to really bury this. But I do want to discuss what happened with President Trump. And right here, Bloomberg with the headline: Trump wins Michigan ruling to remain on the primary ballot. Now, all of this has to do with challenges being made across the country regarding the 14th Amendment, specifically Section 3. I need to read it to you, sir, but I'll read it because some people may not know it. That no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as any member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, to me, that says that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib can't be members of Congress because they've given aid and comfort to Hamas. The Trump hater wants to say that it is because of January 6th that Trump is precluded from being on the ballot. Michigan, the court said no. Other states have said no. Am I making the proper argument that they're trying to make against Trump? And what have these rulings said?
Well, the ruling, there was one in Minnesota, which is a little narrower than the one in that just came down in Michigan. The one in Minnesota was simply that it's premature, that there's this Article 3 and the power of the state election official to remove someone from a ballot does not in any way, shape, or form relate to a primary ballot. Okay, and so the court in Minnesota said, hey, you can come back later for the general election, but none of what you're saying applies to a primary, because a primary is essentially just the internal operating rules of a party to nominate somebody. It's not actually putting a name on the ballot. Michigan went further, and I think is probably correct in going further, and which I think also may be why we're never going to get a definitive answer. Michigan said, yes, it's premature. This is just the primary ballot. But the judge there went further and said that it's a non-justiciable, hard to pronounce, term, meaning it's not something for the judiciary to decide, that it's a political question, and that the judiciary should not be deciding political questions. That ruling, if it holds up, when they come back for the general election challenge, really gets rid of the case, because it says you're in the wrong place. This is not for the courts to decide. This is a political issue. Now, how that plays out in real life, we tend to think that there's always an answer to things under the Constitution that a judge should decide. And I think what that judge says is that, no, this is a political question. Maybe it's for Congress to deal with. Maybe it's for the voters to deal with. If you think somebody committed an insurrection, don't vote for them. Judge didn't say that, but I mean, that's how you would resolve it politically. And so we don't have a definitive answer in Michigan because the judge there did say it's premature. We can certainly expect Democrats to be back once Trump is nominated, because this would have to occur very late in the process. This would have to occur after he is the official nominee of the Republican Party. So that would be after the convention, and a request is made to have his name be on the general election ballot. So this is something that we're probably going to be dealing with in June or July, probably July.
What I think is interesting is that they're asking the judge to say what Congress did not say regarding removal. There was no moving forward on impeachment after the second impeachment. There was no removal from office. The charge of insurrection is made by a political party, but has not been ever adjudicated anywhere. Is there a judge out there who desperately wants to get on the record and say, oh, yes, I've decided because this group of people feel a certain way, this is now a ruling?
Well, I'm sure if they bring enough of these cases, they're going to find a judge. Okay. And so the question is, how is the federal judiciary and the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately going to rule? And they haven't had luck finding a judge yet. I mean, this is obviously a monumental decision to keep somebody off a ballot, for reasons not having to do with other qualifications, your age, your citizenship, things like that. Did you file the right number of signatures? And those are things that are not controversial to keep somebody off a ballot. But, I think they're going to have trouble finding somebody. I'm not saying they won't find somebody who's going to want to make this decision. And you're right. Congress, during the impeachment, could have convicted Trump, and he wouldn't have been able to run for office again. Congress chose not to. So that's what I mean when that was an opportunity. So I think that this is going to linger. Courts are going to keep saying primary ballot is not something we have to deal with now. Come back to us after he's the nominee. So we're going to see these fights play out in July and August, and then the stakes will even be higher. Presuming he is the nominee, you're going to be asking a judge to rule that the Republican Party has no nominee for their ballot. Which is worse than now. The primary, they can nominate somebody else.
But I mean, so much of this, whether I'm a Trump guy or not a Trump guy, I've said this before. If Trump's the nominee, I'll vote for him. But I think I have a couple directions I want to go in before that's the case. But this is so much a conversation as we're watching, as you and I have discussed the indictments. There is an election interference conversation to be had here. Has anybody discussed within the judicial world that what we're seeing from Fani Willis in Atlanta, what we're seeing from Letitia James in New York, what we've seen from Jack Smith, the special counsel, this is not the way justice was intended to portray itself?
Well, this is a point I've made. I know you've made. A lot of people have made that this should have all been done a year ago. This, whatever they're accusing Trump of being and doing, they could have brought these cases almost 2 years ago. We would have the answer to whether he's going to be a convicted felon, not in the middle of a primary race. And in some cases, this may be after he's the nominee. So this is, to me, absolute election interference. When you're talking about a major political candidate for a major party, someone who, whether you believe the polling now or not, based on the polling, he is significantly in the lead, is the most likely nominee. And you wait until the middle of that cycle to bring these cases. To me, that is election interference. It may not be illegal election interference, but it is election interference.
William Jacobson, a Cornell law professor, the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Check out legalinsurrection.com. Check out the foundation, the work that the man is doing over there regarding critical race theory, things being taught in schools and college campuses across the country. Legalinsurrection.com. Always appreciate you, William Jacobson. Can't thank you enough. Can't thank you enough. I think it freaks people out that I'm very honest about the fact that I've never understood Never Trump a day in my life. Never Trump is amongst the most radically unconservative thought processes I've ever come across. There's nothing conservative about it, and the people who push that really have to question what it is they ever actually learned from Burke or Locke or anybody else. But I'm not Trump or die. I'm about winning. I am okay with incrementalism to get to where I need to go if I cannot get things in large swaths. And I get that this is different than how other people view the situation. I understand this. And that's a fine disagreement. But the idea that we're now going to have people try and keep a guy off the ballot instead of letting the people decide, man, that should make you sick. It doesn't matter where you are on Trump. That should make you sick. These people think that they know best, and you shouldn't even have the option. That's a radical proposition. That's a radical, despicable, disgusting thought process. These people who believe that they are your betters, that they know best for you, and you should do what they say, and they'll tell you who you can vote for. No. Isn't it bad enough they did that to Bernie Sanders when they gave you Hillary Clinton in 2016? We've seen what happens when they tell you who you can vote for. It doesn't work out well. I don't plan on giving them any more power than they already have, and I plan on taking as much power from them as I possibly can. Guys, appreciate you being here, and my thanks to Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org, economic liberty, free speech. And that's the name of the game. My sponsors there. Good people, and I will catch you next time. Take care.